What started as a quiet morning at the Central Metropolitan Police Station would soon become a defining moment in law enforcement history. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to comment where you're watching from today. The events you're about to witness will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about justice and corruption. The prestigious police station stood tall in the heart of downtown, its pristine facade masking the darkness that lurked within its walls. For years, it had been a symbol of law and order, but on this fateful morning, that image would be shattered by one man's relentless pursuit of truth. Frank Morrison, known in certain circles for his particular set of skills, wasn't someone who attracted attention, unless he wanted to. And today, he wanted to. The morning sun cast long shadows across the station's steps as Morrison approached, his determined stride catching the eye of every officer in the vicinity. His reputation preceded him, ex-Special Forces, now a successful security consultant, a man who operated in the shadows of a world few understood. But today, there was nothing shadowy about his intentions. His friend James "Jimmy" Reynolds, a decorated former military officer, had been arrested on charges that made no sense to anyone who knew him. The air in the precinct grew thick with tension as Morrison pushed through the glass doors, his presence immediately commanding attention. Officer Kevin Brooks, the desk sergeant who had seen it all in his 20 years of service, felt a chill run down his spine. There was something different about this visitor, something that set off every instinct honed through decades of experience. Morrison approached the desk with measured steps, his voice carrying across the lobby with quiet authority. "I'm here to see Captain Pierce." It wasn't a request. Behind the desk, Officer Brooks shifted uncomfortably, aware of the orders he'd received regarding this particular visitor. But Morrison wasn't leaving, not today, not when his friend's life hung in the balance. What the corrupt officers within these walls didn't know was that Morrison had spent the last 72 hours piecing together a puzzle that pointed to something far more sinister than a simple false arrest. The evidence against Jimmy Reynolds had been fabricated with surgical precision, but they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated the lengths Morrison would go to protect his own. Lieutenant Derek Walsh, Captain Pierce's right-hand man, emerged from a side door, his attempt at projecting authority undermined by the slight tremor in his hands. "Mr. Morrison, Captain Pierce is unavailable. I suggest you leave." The words hung in the air like smoke, a challenge that Morrison had no intention of backing down from. But Morrison didn't move. Instead, he reached into his jacket, causing several officers to tense, only to produce a file. "Interesting reading material, Lieutenant. Especially the part about the offshore accounts." The color drained from Walsh's face as Morrison continued, "Tell Pierce I'm not leaving until I see my friend." Detective Sarah Winters watched this exchange from her desk, her keen instincts telling her that something wasn't right. She had been investigating irregularities within the department for months, careful to keep her suspicions hidden from her colleagues. Morrison's arrival might just be the catalyst she needed to blow this whole thing wide open. As tensions escalated, Officer Maria Rodriguez, a rookie who had already seen enough corruption to last a lifetime, discreetly slipped a keycard onto her desk, a silent act of rebellion against the system she had sworn to uphold. Morrison caught this subtle movement, a slight nod acknowledging the unexpected ally. Commissioner Richard Hayes's arrival at the station that morning was no coincidence. The power players were gathering, drawn by the disruption to their carefully constructed house of cards. Hayes strode through the lobby, his expensive suit and practiced smile a stark contrast to Morrison's battle-ready demeanor. "Mr. Morrison," Hayes addressed him with false warmth, "perhaps we could discuss this matter in my office?" But Morrison had done his homework. He knew about Hayes's meetings with known crime figures, the suspicious property developments, the pattern of cases that disappeared into thin air. "I prefer to keep things public, Commissioner. Transparency and all that." Morrison's words carried a weight that made several officers shift uncomfortably. Detective Michael O'Connor, a veteran cop torn between loyalty and truth, found himself unable to meet anyone's eyes. The tension in the station continued to build as Morrison revealed more cards from his hand. "Interesting thing about digital forensics, Commissioner. Deleted files have a way of resurfacing." He produced a small USB drive, its presence causing Hayes to falter mid-step. Like the real footage from the night Jimmy was arrested. What followed was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Morrison had positioned himself in the center of the lobby, forcing his opponents to reveal themselves through their reactions. Officers Miller and Peterson, known as associates of Captain Pierce, shifted nervously near the stairwell. Their body language screamed guilt to anyone trained to notice. Captain Marcus Pierce finally emerged from his office, his face a mask of professional concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mr. Morrison, causing a scene won't help your friend's situation." But Morrison saw through the facade, recognizing the subtle tells of a man whose control was slipping. "Let's talk about the warehouse on 10th Street, Captain. The one that doesn't exist on any official records but receives weekly visits from your personal vehicle." Morrison's words hit their mark. Pierce's mask slipped for just a moment, but it was enough for everyone watching to notice. The lobby had become eerily quiet, the routine sounds of police work fading away as officers and civilians alike found themselves drawn into the unfolding drama. Agent Diana Foster, an FBI agent who had been quietly monitoring the situation, made notes from her unobtrusive position near the water cooler. Morrison continued his psychological assault, each carefully chosen word designed to apply pressure to the fractures in their corrupt foundation. "Your friend Reynolds isn't here," Pierce finally snapped, his composure cracking. But Morrison smiled, a predator's smile that sent chills through the room. "I know exactly where Jimmy is, Captain. Just like I know about the meetings at the abandoned steel mill, the doctored evidence, and the witnesses who suddenly changed their stories. The question isn't where Jimmy is, it's how many people in this room were involved in framing him." The atmosphere in the station had become electric. Officers who had nothing to hide found themselves drawn to Morrison's orbit, while others tried to make themselves scarce. Detective Winters, seeing her opportunity, began quietly accessing files on her computer, her years of careful investigation finally finding purpose. Morrison had orchestrated this confrontation perfectly, knowing that the pressure would force his opponents to make mistakes. And they did. Lieutenant Walsh's attempt to make a quiet phone call was noticed by everyone. Officer Rodriguez's body cam, which she had deliberately left running, captured every nervous glance and whispered conversation. The world outside the station continued its normal rhythm, unaware that inside these walls, a war was being waged. Not with bullets or fists, but with information, pressure, and the kind of strategic thinking that had kept Morrison alive through countless operations. As the morning wore on, the true scope of Morrison's plan began to reveal itself. He hadn't come alone. Anonymous tips had been sent to every major news outlet in the city. Surveillance footage had been uploaded to secure servers. Dead man switches had been set. He wasn't just here to save his friend, he was here to tear down an empire of corruption. The first crack appeared when Officer Miller, sweating profusely, approached Detective Winters' desk. Pierce's shout of, "Stand down," came too late. The house of cards was beginning to collapse, and everyone in the station could feel it. Comment below if you've ever witnessed corruption being exposed in your community. What you're about to see in the next part of this story will show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes, and why Frank Morrison's battle is far from over. The tension builds as we prepare to reveal what happens next. The question isn't just about saving Jimmy Reynolds anymore. It's about exposing a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of law enforcement. But as Frank Morrison is about to discover, some secrets are worth killing to protect, and not everyone in the station will survive the day. The tension in the Central Metropolitan Police Station had reached a breaking point. As security cameras silently recorded every movement, the morning sun cast harsh shadows through the blinds, creating bars of light across the lobby floor. What happened next would shake the foundation of law enforcement to its core. Frank Morrison's presence had triggered a chain reaction that nobody could stop. Detective Sarah Winters, who had been quietly gathering evidence for months, noticed an unusual pattern of movement among Pierce's loyal officers. They were systematically deleting files, shredding documents, and making urgent phone calls. But they didn't know about the backup servers, the ones that Tommy Winters, Sarah's brother, had helped her set up months ago. The station's atmosphere grew heavier as Captain Pierce retreated to his office, but not before exchanging a meaningful glance with Lieutenant Walsh. Morrison caught the subtle exchange, his years of training allowing him to read the unspoken command. Within minutes, Walsh was mobilizing trusted officers, positioning them at key points throughout the building. Morrison's phone vibrated, a message from Amanda Reynolds, Jimmy's wife. "They're moving him." 3 simple words that confirmed Morrison's suspicions. The corrupt officers weren't just trying to frame Jimmy, they were planning to silence him permanently. The clock was ticking, and Morrison knew that the next few hours would determine whether his friend lived or died. Commissioner Hayes paced in his office, his carefully maintained facade cracking under pressure. Through the glass walls, Morrison could see him making frantic calls, likely to the same powerful figures who had helped build this house of corruption. But Hayes didn't know about the surveillance equipment Morrison had planted weeks ago, recording every incriminating conversation. Officer Maria Rodriguez, moving with deliberate casualness, approached Morrison with a cup of coffee. As she handed it to him, she whispered, "Evidence locker B, 3rd shelf, case number 47891. Her hand trembled slightly, knowing that this act of defiance could cost her everything. Morrison's slight nod was the only acknowledgement she received before she returned to her post. Detective Michael O'Connor, a veteran cop who had seen the department change over the years, watched the unfolding drama with growing unease. He had turned a blind eye to many things, justifying it as necessary for the greater good. But as he observed Morrison's methodical dismantling of their carefully constructed facades, he realized that the time for neutrality had passed. The evidence locker held more than just case files. Behind the carefully organized boxes and tagged items lay the truth about a series of coordinated operations that went beyond simple corruption. Morrison had suspected drug trafficking and evidence tampering, but what he found pointed to something far more sinister. International weapons deals, human trafficking operations, and political assassinations, all coordinated through this very police station. Agent Diana Foster, maintaining her cover as a routine FBI observer, was documenting everything. Her presence wasn't a coincidence. She represented just one arm of a much larger federal investigation. Morrison's actions today were providing the catalyst needed to bring down not just a corrupt police department, but an entire criminal enterprise that had embedded itself in law enforcement. The station's communications system suddenly crackled to life. A reported shooting at the courthouse had multiple units responding, leaving the station severely understaffed. Morrison recognized the tactic. They were clearing the building of potential witnesses and honest officers. Captain Pierce's people were making their move. Detective Winters, sensing the shift in atmosphere, began implementing her own contingency plans. Years of careful preparation had led to this moment. As she accessed encrypted files on her secure laptop, she noticed Officer Miller watching her intently. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, she knew she had to act fast. Lieutenant Walsh's voice carried across the lobby, ordering a building lockdown due to a supposed security breach. The remaining civilians were quickly ushered out, and the heavy front doors were secured. Morrison found himself in a fortress now controlled by his enemies, but this was exactly what he had anticipated. The surveillance footage Morrison had mentioned earlier wasn't just about Jimmy's arrest. It contained years of documented meetings between Pierce, Hayes, and various criminal enterprises. The USB drive he carried held enough evidence to bring down not just the corrupt officers in the station, but judges, politicians, and business leaders who had profited from their crimes. Officer Rodriguez's body cam continued recording as she witnessed Officers Miller and Peterson removing evidence from the narcotics lockup. The movement of drugs had always been part of their operation, but today they were desperate, knowing that their time was running out. Each incriminating action was being transmitted to secure servers outside the building. Commissioner Hayes finally emerged from his office, his expensive suit now wrinkled from stress. "Morrison, you have no idea what you're dealing with. Some things are bigger than one man's crusade for justice." But Morrison's response chilled the room. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with, Commissioner. The question is, do you know who you're dealing with?" The power dynamics in the station were shifting. Officers who had once been loyal to Pierce were now questioning their allegiance. They had signed up for some corruption, maybe even serious crimes, But the depths of depravity revealed in Morrison's evidence was more than many could stomach. Detective O'Connor finally made his move. Decades of experience had taught him to recognize a losing battle, and as he approached Morrison with his hands raised, he carried a thick folder. "There's something you need to see," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of long-held secrets. "It's about who really ordered Jimmy's arrest." The documents O'Connor provided revealed a conspiracy that reached far beyond the city limits. Jimmy Reynolds hadn't been arrested because he witnessed a crime or threatened to expose corruption. He had unknowingly uncovered evidence of a massive international operation, one that used police departments across the country as distribution networks for weapons and drugs. Captain Pierce, watching from his office, knew that his carefully constructed world was crumbling. But he had one card left to play. With a simple phone call, he set in motion events that would turn this standoff into something far deadlier. "Execute Contingency Plan Delta," he ordered, knowing that these words would signal the beginning of a violent confrontation. Morrison noticed the subtle shift in the corrupt officers' positioning. They were preparing for something, their movements betraying military training that went beyond standard police procedures. These weren't just corrupt cops. They were mercenaries placed within the department to protect the organization's interests. Detective Winter's computer suddenly pinged, an alert from her brother Tommy. The backup servers were being targeted by a sophisticated cyber attack. Someone was trying to erase all digital evidence of the department's crimes. But Tommy had anticipated this, and his countermeasures were already in place, protecting the crucial data. The tension in the station reached fever pitch as Pierce's loyal officers began moving with clear purpose. Morrison could read their intentions in their movements. They weren't planning to arrest anyone. This was going to be staged as a tragic incident, a violent confrontation that would leave no witnesses to testify about the department's corruption. Agent Foster, recognizing the escalating danger, broke her cover. Her FBI credentials provided another layer of protection, but she knew it wouldn't be enough to deter Pierce's men if they were determined to eliminate threats to their operation. The next few minutes would determine who walked out of the station alive. The station's security cameras captured everything: the positioning of officers, the nervous glances, the subtle checks of weapons. Every moment was being recorded and transmitted, ensuring that whatever happened next would not go undocumented. The truth would survive, even if those who sought to expose it did not. Morrison had positioned himself near Detective Winter's desk, creating a defensive position that would be difficult to approach without being seen. The corrupt officers were running out of options, and desperate people make desperate choices. The stage was set for a confrontation that would expose the true nature of those who had sworn to protect and serve. As Chapter 2 draws to a close, the question isn't just about saving Jimmy Reynolds anymore. It's about surviving long enough to expose a truth that could reshape the entire criminal justice system. The next chapter will reveal just how far these corrupt officers are willing to go to protect their secrets, and whether Morrison's calculated risk will cost him everything. If you've ever wondered about the thin line between justice and corruption, leave a comment below. The events you're about to witness in the next chapter will challenge everything you thought you knew about law enforcement and show you why some truths are worth dying for. The next few moments in the Central Metropolitan Police Station would forever change the lives of everyone inside. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting harsh light through the windows, the first shots were fired. But not from guns, from keyboards. Tommy Winters had just detected and blocked a sophisticated attempt to wipe the station servers clean of all incriminating evidence. Captain Pierce's reaction to the failed server purge told Morrison everything he needed to know. The captain's face contorted with barely controlled rage as he received the news through his earpiece. Morrison had anticipated this move. It's why he had enlisted Tommy's help weeks ago to create an unbreakable backup system. Every deleted file, every erased video, every corrupted document was being preserved in real time on servers far beyond Pierce's reach. Detective Sarah Winters moved with calculated precision, her years of undercover work evident in how naturally she maintained her composure while secretly transferring critical files. She knew that at any moment, Pierce's men could make their move. The weight of her backup weapon pressed reassuringly against her ankle, a last resort she hoped she wouldn't need. The station's lobby had become a chessboard, with Morrison and Pierce's forces positioning themselves for the inevitable confrontation. Officer Rodriguez, still faithfully recording everything on her body cam, noticed Officer Miller's hand twitching near his holster. The young officer's tells were obvious to Morrison. Miller wasn't just nervous, he was waiting for a signal. Commissioner Hayes made one last attempt at damage control, approaching Morrison with a new proposition. "Name your price," he whispered, careful to stay out of Rodriguez's body cam range. "Everyone has one. Whatever they're paying you to do this, I'll double it." Morrison's response was a quiet chuckle that sent chills down Hayes' spine. "You still don't get it, Commissioner. This was never about money." The truth about Jimmy Reynolds' arrest began to unravel faster than Pierce could contain it. Detective O'Connor, having chosen his side, was now openly sharing information about Operation Blackfish, a massive international weapons trafficking operation that used police departments as distribution hubs. Jimmy had accidentally stumbled upon one of their shipments while working security at the docks, making him a loose end that needed to be tied up. Agent Foster's FBI credentials had bought them some time, but Morrison could see Pierce's men adapting their strategy. They weren't just facing a few corrupt cops anymore. These were trained operatives who had infiltrated law enforcement. Their movements were too precise, their positioning too tactical for standard police training. Lieutenant Walsh made his move, ordering all non-essential personnel to evacuate due to a supposed gas leak. It was a clever cover to empty the building of witnesses while maintaining plausible deniability. But Morrison had prepared for this too. Hidden cameras installed throughout the station were streaming everything to secure servers, ensuring that whatever happened next would be documented. The true scope of the conspiracy began to emerge through Detective Winter's investigation. The weapon shipments were just the tip of the iceberg. The station had been used to facilitate human trafficking, drug distribution, and even political assassinations. Pierce and his men weren't just corrupt cops. They were part of an international criminal enterprise that had infiltrated law enforcement agencies across the country. Morrison's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Amanda Reynolds. Jimmy was being moved from his holding cell, but not to any official facility. The transport order had been signed by Judge Harrison, another name on Morrison's list of corrupted officials. They were planning to make Jimmy disappear permanently. The station's security cameras caught Officer Peterson accessing the evidence locker, removing files related to unsolved murders from the past 5 years. Morrison had suspected these cases were connected, but the proof was in those files. Each victim had gotten too close to exposing the truth about Operation Blackfish. Detective O'Connor's revelations continued, each detail more damning than the last. The operation went beyond weapons and drugs. They had judges in their pocket, politicians on their payroll, and enough blackmail material to ensure silence from anyone who discovered the truth. But they hadn't counted on someone like Morrison, someone with nothing left to lose and the skills to tear their operation apart. Captain Pierce made his call. "Execute Delta Protocol," he ordered, not realizing that Morrison had already decoded their communication protocols. Delta meant no witnesses, no evidence, and a cover story about a violent confrontation with an armed intruder. They were planning to turn the station into a crime scene. The first physical confrontation came when Officer Miller made his move toward Detective Winter's desk. Morrison's reaction was instant and precise. Without drawing his weapon, he disabled Miller with a simple hand movement that left the corrupt officer gasping on the floor. The message was clear: Morrison wasn't just some civilian they could intimidate. Agent Foster's hand moved to her weapon as Walsh's men began to close in. The tension in the station had reached its breaking point. Every person present knew that the next few moments would determine not just their futures, but the future of law enforcement in the city. Morrison's voice cut through the tension. "I have evidence of every operation, every deal, every murder. Right now, it's being transmitted to every major news outlet and federal agency in the country. You can't stop what's coming." His words hit Pierce like physical blows, each revelation another nail in the captain's coffin. The station's power grid suddenly fluctuated, another failed attempt to disrupt Morrison's digital dead man switch. Tommy Winters had planned for this, ensuring that the evidence would survive any attempt to destroy it. The backup generators kicked in, casting the station in an eerie emergency lighting that made everyone's movements seem more threatening. Detective Winter's computer pinged with an incoming transmission. The FBI had received their evidence package and was mobilizing response teams. Pierce's empire was crumbling in real time, and the desperate look in his eyes told Morrison that the captain wasn't going down without a fight. Officer Rodriguez's body cam captured the moment Walsh received orders through his earpiece. The lieutenant's expression changed from controlled anxiety to deadly determination. Morrison recognized that look. He had seen it on the faces of cornered enemies in his Special Forces days. Walsh and his men were preparing for their final stand. The station's layout had become a tactical nightmare. Pierce's men had positioned themselves to control all major exits, but Morrison had counted on this. He hadn't come to escape, he had come to end this, once and for all. The evidence was out, the truth was spreading, and now it was just a matter of surviving the next few minutes. Commissioner Hayes made one last desperate move, reaching for his phone to call in what he thought was his trump card. But Morrison's quiet words stopped him cold. The mayor's already in FBI custody. They picked him up an hour ago. Hayes's face went pale as he realized that his entire power structure had already been dismantled. The truth about Jimmy Reynolds's frame-up had become clear to everyone in the station. He wasn't just another victim of corruption. He was the thread that, when pulled, had unraveled an entire criminal empire. His arrest had given Morrison the opening he needed to expose decades of corruption, murder, and international crime. As Chapter 3 draws to a close, the station has become a powder keg ready to explode. Pierce's men are armed and desperate, Morrison's allies are in position, and the evidence of countless crimes is spreading across the internet faster than anyone can contain it. The next chapter will reveal who walks out of this station alive, and what remains of the law enforcement institution that had become a front for international crime. If you've ever wondered about the true cost of exposing corruption, stay tuned for the final chapter. The events you're about to witness will show you why some battles are worth fighting, no matter the cost. Comment below if you've ever had to stand up against a corrupt system. Your story matters. The emergency lights cast an ominous red glow throughout the Central Metropolitan Police Station as the final act of this unprecedented drama began to unfold. The air was thick with tension as Captain Pierce emerged from his office, his face a mask of cold determination. For the first time since the standoff began, he was wearing his tactical gear, a clear signal that diplomacy was no longer an option. Morrison's years of Special Forces training had taught him to read the signs of imminent violence. The subtle shifts in positioning, the almost imperceptible hand signals between Pierce's men, the way Lieutenant Walsh was directing certain officers toward pre-designated points. They weren't preparing to make arrests, they were setting up a kill zone. Detective Sarah Winter's computer screen flickered with an urgent message from her brother Tommy. The digital evidence was now secured on servers across 3 continents, and federal agencies were already moving on locations connected to Operation Blackfish. Even if Pierce's men succeeded in eliminating everyone in the station, they couldn't stop what was coming. Officer Rodriguez's body cam captured the moment everything changed. Commissioner Hayes, realizing the inevitability of his downfall, made a desperate break for the emergency exit. In his haste, he knocked over a junior officer, causing the young man's weapon to discharge. The sound of the gunshot shattered the tense silence, and chaos erupted. Morrison's response was instantaneous. As Pierce's men reached for their weapons, he executed a perfectly timed maneuver that sent him behind the relative safety of a concrete pillar. Detective Winters and Agent Foster found cover behind overturned desks, their weapons drawn but not yet firing. The standoff had just become a potential bloodbath. Lieutenant Walsh's voice cut through the chaos, ordering his men to hold their fire. But Morrison could see the fear in their eyes. These weren't just corrupt cops facing arrest, they were cornered animals facing the end of everything they had built. The next few moments would determine whether this ended in surrender or slaughter. The truth about Jimmy Reynolds's location finally emerged through Officer Rodriguez's quick thinking. While everyone was focused on the confrontation in the lobby, she had accessed the transport logs. Jimmy wasn't being moved to another facility, he was being held in a secret room beneath the station's parking garage, a place used by Pierce's organization to make problems disappear. Detective O'Connor, proving his commitment to redemption, had quietly positioned himself near the entrance to the underground area. His decades of experience told him that Pierce would try to use Jimmy as leverage when everything else failed. The old detective's hunch proved correct as Pierce barked orders through his radio, commanding officers Miller and Peterson to secure the package. Morrison's voice carried across the lobby with chilling clarity. The building is surrounded by federal agents. Every exit is covered. Every piece of evidence has been secured. It's over, Pierce. The only question is how many people die before you accept it. His words had an immediate impact on the younger officers who had been drawn into Pierce's web. One by one, they began lowering their weapons. The station's security system suddenly blared to life. Someone had triggered the fire alarm. The sprinklers activated, drenching everyone in water that mixed with the emergency lighting to create an almost surreal atmosphere. But Morrison recognized this for what it was, a desperate attempt to destroy any remaining physical evidence. Captain Pierce made his final play. "You think this ends with me, Morrison? We have people everywhere, judges, politicians, other departments. They'll bury this so deep that no one will ever find the truth." But Morrison's quiet laugh sent chills through the room. "Check your phone, Captain. Every major news outlet in the country is already running the story. Your people are too busy saving themselves to help you." The evidence that Tommy Winters had secured painted a picture of corruption so vast that it staggered the imagination. Decades of crimes, hundreds of millions in illegal profits, and a body count that would shock even hardened investigators. Pierce and his organization hadn't just corrupted the system, they had turned it into a weapon against the very people it was meant to protect. Detective Winters' voice carried an edge of triumph as she announced, "FBI tactical teams are entering the building. It's over." The sound of multiple helicopters overhead confirmed her words, and Morrison could see the fight draining from Pierce's men. They had finally realized that their empire had crumbled to dust. Lieutenant Walsh made one last desperate attempt to maintain control, raising his weapon toward Morrison. But before he could pull the trigger, Officer Rodriguez's taser found its mark. The lieutenant collapsed, his weapon clattering across the floor, taken down by one of the rookie officers he had tried to corrupt. The underground chamber where Jimmy was being held burst open as FBI tactical teams swarmed in. Jimmy Reynolds emerged, battered but alive, his first words a warning, "They're destroying evidence in the basement." But Morrison's calm reply brought relief to everyone who had fought for justice. "Let them try. We have everything. All of it. Destroying papers won't change anything now." Commissioner Hayes was found hiding in a maintenance closet, attempting to delete incriminating files from his phone. But Tommy's cybersecurity measures had already locked down and backed up every digital device in the building. The commissioner's desperate attempts to save himself had only succeeded in adding another charge to his growing list of crimes. Captain Pierce, realizing the futility of his situation, made one last attempt to negotiate. "I know things, Morrison. Things that could help you. We could make a deal." Morrison's response was cold and final. "The only deal you'll be making is with federal prosecutors. And they already have everything they need." The station's main doors burst open as FBI tactical teams flooded in, led by Agent Foster's superiors. The look of relief on the honest officers' faces was matched only by the despair of those who had chosen the wrong side. Years of corruption and violence were ending not with a dramatic shootout, but with the quiet click of handcuffs. Detective O'Connor, his redemption complete, was the one who personally escorted Jimmy Reynolds to safety. The old detective's final words to Pierce spoke for every honest cop who had watched helplessly as corruption poisoned their department. "You forgot what the badge means. It's not about power, it's about protecting people." The aftermath would shake law enforcement to its core. Hundreds of arrests across multiple jurisdictions, countless cases reopened, and a complete overhaul of police oversight procedures. Morrison's one-man war against corruption had evolved into something much larger, a movement for genuine reform and accountability. As the sun set on one of the most dramatic days in law enforcement history, Morrison finally allowed himself a moment of reflection. The price of exposing the truth had been high, but the cost of allowing corruption to continue would have been infinitely higher. Sometimes, he realized, the greatest acts of loyalty to the system come from those willing to tear down its corrupt foundations and rebuild from scratch. If you've ever wondered whether one person